This is a story about how sometimes the right person can help you rewrite your past. Arthur was a man who believed his story had already been written, and the ending was tragic. A former investigative journalist whose career ended in public disgrace after a story he staked his reputation on turned out to be based on fabricated evidence. He now lived as a recluse. His only solace was the old, forgotten city archives, where he worked part-time as a digital cataloger, silently transferring history from decaying paper to cold, unfeeling servers. He was preserving other people's pasts while trying to escape his own. Clara was a whirlwind of color and noise, a best-selling romance novelist suffering from a profound case of writer's block. Her publisher was demanding her next manuscript, but the words wouldn't come. Her stories felt hollow. In a desperate search for inspiration, she began volunteering at the archives, believing that truth was the best source of fiction. Their first meeting was a clash of universes. She arrived in a bright yellow raincoat, talking to herself, her arms full of notebooks. He was hunched over a scanner, wearing a faded sweater, the embodiment of silence. "You must be Arthur. I'm Clara. I'm here to find a story," she announced, her voice too loud for the hallowed halls. "Stories are in the fiction section. This is the archive. We deal in facts," he replied without looking up, his tone flat. But Clara was undeterred. She began to explore, pulling out random boxes, her curiosity a disruptive force in his ordered world. She'd ask him endless questions about the people in the photographs, the authors of the old letters. He'd answer in monosyllables, annoyed by her insistence on finding a narrative in everything. The turning point came when Clara discovered a box of unclaimed items from a closed-down post office, a collection of undelivered dead letters from the 1970s. One letter, in particular, caught her attention. It was a love letter, beautifully written, from a young man to a woman named Eleanor, begging for a second chance after a terrible misunderstanding. "See? This is a story," Clara exclaimed, thrusting the letter at Arthur. "It's a historical document," he corrected, though he found himself reading it. The raw plea in the words resonated with a part of him he thought was dead. Clara made it her mission to find out what happened. Had the letter ever been delivered? Did Eleanor give him a second chance? Arthur, despite himself, was drawn into the mystery. His journalistic instincts, dormant for years, flickered to life. He showed her how to cross-reference names in old city directories, how to search through digitalized newspaper archives. For the first time in years, he was using his skills not to uncover a lie, but to trace a truth about love. They spent days together in the dusty archive, a slow dance of contrasting energies. Her boundless optimism began to chip away at his cynicism. His meticulous precision gave her chaos a necessary structure. She started to see the profound sadness behind his silence, and he started to see the fierce intelligence behind her exuberance. One afternoon, they finally found an old wedding announcement in a local paper. The man from the letter had married his Eleanor 6 months after the letter was written. "He got his second chance," Clara whispered, her eyes shining. "Some people do," Arthur said, and for the first time, their gaze held more than just professional courtesy. Inspired, Clara started writing again, but this time, her story was different. It was about a man who thought his life was over, learning to live again. She would read passages to Arthur, and he would offer quiet, insightful critiques. He became her first editor, her most trusted reader. In helping her find her voice, he was slowly rediscovering his own. The climax came when Clara's publisher read the new manuscript and loved it. At the small celebration she threw in the archive after hours, she handed Arthur a first edition. The dedication page read, "For Arthur, who taught me that the best stories aren't the ones we make up, but the ones we have the courage to live. He looked at her, the walls around his heart finally crumbling. You were right, he said, his voice thick with emotion. This place is full of stories. I was just too afraid to be part of one again. Clara took his hand. Your story isn't over, Arthur. It just needed a new chapter. In the quiet of the archive, surrounded by the whispers of 1,000 pasts, they stood together, two people who had helped each other rewrite their endings. He had given her truth for her fiction, and she had given him the fiction of a future he never dared to believe in, a future that was now, wonderfully, becoming fact. Weeks later, as autumn leaves painted the streets gold, Arthur stood before Clara in the very archive where their story had begun. But this time, he wasn't holding historical documents. In his hands was a small, velvet box. Clara, he began, his voice steadier than it had been in years, you taught me that every story deserves a second chance. And my story, it only makes sense with you in it. He opened the box. Nestled inside wasn't a ring, but an old, tarnished key. It's the key to my grandmother's house in the countryside, Arthur explained, his eyes never leaving hers. It's where I went to hide after everything fell apart. It's where I thought I'd spend the rest of my life alone. But now, I want to fill it with new stories. Our stories. Clara's eyes filled with tears, but they were tears of pure joy. What about the archives? Your work. Arthur smiled, a genuine, unburdened smile that reached his eyes. I've spoken to the director. We're starting a new project, the Living Archive. We'll help people trace their family histories, record their stories. You were right all along. These documents aren't just facts. They're lives. They're love stories. He took her hand, placing the key in her palm. This isn't a proposal. It's an invitation. To build a new chapter together. To create our own archive of moments. Clara looked from the key to Arthur's hopeful face, then at the shelves surrounding them, witnesses to countless stories of love, loss, and second chances. I don't need a ring, she whispered, closing her fingers around the key. I need the writer of my next chapters. And I want you to be him. As they embraced between the bookshelves, the morning sun streaming through the stained glass windows painted them in colors of hope. Outside, the city continued its relentless pace, but in this quiet sanctuary, two people had finally found their happy ending, or rather, their beautiful beginning.